right, gentlemen, welcome back to the Danger Ranger podcast. I'm your host, Zach Allred. This is episode 5. Got some good topics for y'all today. More Ranger stuff because that's what's going on right now. Like, people like it, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as I've got new and interesting things to tell about the Ranger Regiment and about life in Regiment or Ranger School or Army stuff in general. Today's podcast is sponsored by me, Rockwell Designs. I've got these Woodland AK chest rigs getting restocked this coming Friday at 1900 or 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you've got an AK, I highly recommend it. It's got 6 mag carrying capacity, molly across the front with some Velcro. We've got an integrated admin panel in the back right here, and then we've got a flat for dangler style pouches. It comes with shoulder straps and a back strap, and it's got these sleeves for tourniquets. Go check out my Instagram page, Rockwell Designs Actual, and the website, Rockwell-Designs. Sign up for the email list. Sign up for in-stock notifications on those chest rigs. They usually sell pretty quick, so if you like what you see and you want to go get one yourself, go sign up for those restock notifications and the email list. Email list subscribers generally will get a head start, about 15 minutes head start, and the way you're the best. That's the best way to guarantee yourself a rig if you like what you see. So today's podcast is going to be kind of just answering a bunch of little small questions that aren't enough to film an entire video for on their own. So one of the questions I've been getting asked a lot in the comments is related to age in serving in a Ranger Regiment. So a lot of dudes have been asking, oh, how old is too old for Ranger Regiment? Oh, I'm in my late 20s. Is that too old for Ranger Regiment? I have a family and I'm old. Is that too, how does that work for Ranger Regiment? And I'll be the first to say, there is an age gap, or an age cap rather, and I'm not too sure on the age cap, but there is definitely one. I want to say that's late 30s. That being said, I went through RASP with a dude who was in his late 20s. I want to say he was like 27, 28, while I was, 18. And then we had a guy in our platoon who was in his 30s, and he was a cop before he joined the Army. And he was already in a gunfight before he got to Ranger Regiment. I think I mentioned him in a previous video. So you can make it to regiment for sure as an older dude. That being said, it is harder to stay in Ranger Regiment as an older dude, and I'm going to tell you why. So you take an 18-year-old who's done nothing but high school and high school sports and stuff, and maybe worked a part-time job, and then you have a dude who has life experience and a family and has been to college, has done other jobs before Ranger Regiment, and he's going to have a lot more life experience. That being said, that younger dude is going to have the edge on the older guy as far as motivation, because Ranger Regiment's all he knows. It's likely a goal that he's had for a while. It's not something he just stumbled upon one day. He probably been waiting and wanting to do that for a while, and he's ready to do just dumb stuff to stay and to be a Ranger. Whereas the older guy, the problem that I've seen with some of the older guys is they're just not as fired up and not as motivated, and they kind of just, it's hard to put a word on it. They don't walk around with a chip on their shoulder, but they do kind of walk around like they deserve to be treated differently, which if you're a Ranger private, it doesn't matter if you're in your 30s or if you're 17. You're a Ranger private. Guess what? Your team leader and your squad leader and your team and your tabs all have more experience than you. They've spent thousands more hours on the range. Maybe not thousands, but hundreds of hours on the range. Time overseas. They've done all the live fires. They have way more jumps than you. They're younger than you, and they're in charge of you. For a lot of older dudes, it's hard for them to kind of accept that, and they kind of act like they deserve to be treated differently, which is not how it works at all. The ones that I see do well are able to accept that, hey, I'm at the bottom of the hierarchy here. I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to learn my job to the best of my ability, and I'm going to hurry up and get to Ranger School so that I can actually influence and affect good change from my previous life experience. If you've been out there in the world, you probably know a few things that you might do well to try and impart on the younger guys to keep them from screwing up in other areas of their life outside of the Army. So that's where it's valuable to be an older guy in a regiment, is you're not going to fall victim to some of the mistakes that younger dudes will make, like the drinking, picking wrong women, getting involved with the wrong crowds. It's kind of the stuff that I talked about in my the 3 reasons, or the 3 things that you need to do to be successful in regiment. The older guy is going to have an edge on the younger guys on that front, for sure. So hopefully that answered y'all's questions. Yes, it's definitely possible. Yes, I've seen it. But you do have a different set of challenges ahead of you compared to a younger guy, and that's fine. Like, it is what it is. You have an edge in some areas, and in other areas you might have some more weaknesses, and that's all right. All right, so one of the other questions that kind of ties into the old Ranger question is, I've got a family, or I'm planning on starting a family. How does that work into being a Ranger? So I want to say that I talked about this in a day in the life of a Ranger video a little bit, but I'll cover it here again, maybe go into a little bit more detail. So Regiment is pretty family oriented. A lot of the senior enlisted, the majority of the senior enlisted and senior officers, and a lot of the line guys are all married and have, kids and a wife. So they do try and take into consideration, your family. Like the FRG, the Family Readiness Group programs in Regiment are fantastic. They're always organizing events, and they're always looking out for the married Rangers as well as the single Rangers, honestly. There were several times where the FRG put on events for the single Rangers, or like brought food to them in the barracks, which was awesome. That being said, you're still in the Army, and you are still in a high op-tempo environment, high op-tempo unit, where you might get a call at 3 in the morning, telling you got to cancel your vacations because something happened in some corner of the world somewhere, and your company is the one that's on standby for that month. And guess what? Your plans are kaput. Like, you got to go into work, and you might not see your family, and you might not be able to talk to them for a month at a time, or months at a time, if it's something that serious that's popping off. Being in Regiment, there is a constant threat, if you want to call it that, of being called up at any minute's notice. Like, one of the hallmarks of the 75th Ranger Regiment is the ability to deploy within 18 hours anywhere in the world. Now, that's not, again, the whole regiment, but that is an entire Ranger company. The Ranger companies will cycle through being on alert status. And when you're on alert, you are limited in how far you can drive. You're limited on how much you're able to drink. You're limited on basically where you can go and stuff while you're on alert. And that's because of the mission set. So if you've got if your family wouldn't be able to handle, you leaving at no notice for a month or 2 at a time with no phone, you might need to reevaluate. Deployments are slowing down a little bit, so you're not deploying every single year like it used to be. Like before we pulled out of Afghanistan, people were deploying every single year, and it wasn't like a whole year gap in between. Like, you deploy for 3.5 roughly months, you'd come back and you train for about 7 months, and then you deploy again for another 3.5. And it was pretty constant like that. Granted, that's changed now, so you might have a little bit more time. And I'm going to get into talking about Peacetime Regiment here at the end of the video. You do get 2 periods of block leave every year, like I've talked about before, which is you get about 18, I think, days during those block leave periods that you can do, whatever you want with your family. That being said, you don't get to pick exactly when those dates are going to fall. The regiment's going to pick them for you and be like, hey, you're about to deploy. Here's your 18 days. You're going to deploy, or, go on a longer training exercise somewhere in Europe or Korea, which is potentially coming back. Not Korea itself, but like training rotations during the former deployment slotted time in the larger calendar of things. And then once you get back from that deployment, then all right, here's another period of block leave, and then guess what? You're back into the training cycle where it's prep week, training week, recovery week until the next training cycle or the next deployment. So it's a very high-paced environment, and you might not get a lot of family time. That's the truth of it. The regiment will do its best. The battalions do their best to give you downtime and do like marriage retreats and give you long weekends to compensate for days and weeks where you're working through the weekends. But you still are going to lose a lot of family time. when you do have a kid, the regiment, and for at least I can speak to 1st Ranger Battalion, but like if we were slotted to go on deployment and one of the guys was going to have a kid during the deployment, instead of, sending him back mid-rotation, they would just let him stay home. They would find someone else to fill in for him, and that was that. Like, if he wanted to stay, then he could stay home and witness the birth of his kid, and no one would really look down on him for that. They're also really great about doing paternity leave, so if you do have a kid, you're able to take, I don't know how long it is, I want to say that it's, you can get up to 30 days of paternity leave, and you can split that up, I think, anytime during the first year of the child's birth. I'm not exactly sure on that one. I do know that it's close to 30 days, and I want to say that you don't have to use it all at once if you don't want to. So hopefully that, answers some more questions about family life in regiment. And it kind of is going to tie into my next and last topic of conversation for today, which is what is the regiment going to look like during peacetime? Now, right now, the regiment is still deploying. I'm not going to say where. I'm not going to say how many are going right now. There are still deployments available for Ranger Regiment. And like I said earlier in the podcast, you might get called up at no notice. You never know. Half of my deployments were either no notice or like pretty much no notice, whereas like a week out, we learned we were going to deploy instead of staying back and being the rear detachment for that year. So that if you're joining to get deployments and you're hearing that deployments are going away, like I wouldn't let that factor too much into your reasoning, because there's always stuff happening around the world. And because of the fact that the Ranger Regiment proved itself to be a very, very capable asset during the whole global war on terror, they're more apt to get called up for anything now than ever. So if something's happening around the world, like Rangers are going to be part of the package that gets briefed to the freaking president of the United States. Like, hey, we can send a package of a Ranger company on top of, some 160th guys and some SMU guys, and they can be there within, 18 hours. Just because it's peacetime doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to go see some stuff. Like Mogadishu, Battle of the Black Sea, Black Hawk Down, like that whole incident happened during technically peacetime. They were involved in a peacekeeping operation, and they ended up seeing one of the biggest, gunfights that we'd seen since freaking Vietnam. Or maybe, Panama, Grenada. Those are pretty kinetic. But so don't get the idea of you're not going to deploy stuck in your head, because Ranger Regiment is the best place to get a deployment like that anywhere else in the Army during peacetime. As far as the training cycle, what that will look like, I honestly don't know. They're trying to figure it out right now. I've talked to buddies who are still in. I'm obviously still in Savannah, so I see them pretty frequently, and they're trying to figure it out. And I can just leave it at that. But if we were to look historically back at what Ranger Regiment is during peacetime, it's instead of a deployment cycle, they're going and doing schools, or they're going and doing, training rotations in other countries. So my company before, like a year before I got there, or a couple months before I got there rather, at the end of 2015, they went to Korea for, I think it was like 2 months, and did a bunch of training with the Korean Ranger equivalent over there. And what I see happening is that's going to start making a comeback. Like Rangers would do rotations down to South America. They would go to Eastern Europe, Western Europe. They'd go, I think there's, even some that went down to Antarctica. I want to say that I've seen and read in books about Rangers getting, put on an aircraft carrier for a month and did like training exercises off the aircraft carrier, like really just kind of diversifying the Ranger skill set because they have the time to now. I want to say that you'll also get the opportunity to go to more, technical schools outside of what's normally offered to Ranger Regiment. So like sniper school, RSLC, you've got, scuba. I don't think it's very hard to get a free fall slot in Regiment, but those might maybe start getting opened up more just because you're going to have more time on your hands. And then of course, you've got the training. So you are going to be training a lot because it is peacetime. And hopefully regimental leadership realizes that they can, take their foot off the brake just a little bit. Like they don't have to worry about, we got to get ready for the next deployment in 7 months. It's like, hey, let's take a step back and let's reevaluate what the next mission set is, like who we're likely to be fighting, and let's gear our training towards that and make sure we do it in a way that doesn't cause burnout. The Army as a whole is hurting for men right now too, so I would hope that their regiment would take into consideration that fact, where they might not be able to replace guys if they are fed up and want to leave, like a lot of people are doing right now across the Army and across the United States military as a whole. So that's just my, best estimation of where I could see Regiment going in the future, just based off of the history that I've read, and then, obviously the events of the past 20 years. I don't think that it's ever going to be like it was in the 90s with the high and tights and, really, really kind of strict environment. I think that there will be an element of that coming back to a degree, because a garrison peacetime army is harder to keep disciplined, because you're not able to dangle the carrot of we're going to war as much as you can. But with Regiment, it's a little different, because, like I said, you could get called up at 2 in the morning, and you could be somewhere in the world within 24 hours, taking it to the enemy. So there's always that lingering over your head as a Ranger. So it hopefully will inspire you to keep up training and realize that, hey, just because we're not planning on going to Afghanistan this year doesn't mean that we don't need to be ready to go shoot someone's face in. Thanks for watching. Glad that you made it this far. If you did, go check me out on Instagram at Rockwell Designs Actual or Zach Allred Official. The links are in the description below. Tomorrow's video is going to be pretty sick. You don't want to miss it. I'm going to be drinking coffee for the first time in 4 months and kind of talking about why I went on a coffee caffeine fast, and filming, what it does to me and how it feels, because caffeine is technically a drug. But more about that tomorrow. Hope y'all enjoy the rest of your week, and as always, have a good one.